We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking to Eric Moeller of FreeWyld, and this one is a really exciting conversation because I just think it's going to make you feel really motivated to get out there and just live life the way it's meant to be lived, not sucked into our phones, not sucked into our TV screens, without the judgment, of course. As always, this is a no judgment zone, but I just think a lot of times it's encouraging when we hear that it is possible to enjoy life, to look up, to connect with the people around us. And it's wonderful when there are people like Eric out here offering us those experiences and those opportunities to make sure that that happens. And that's exactly what he does with his company, FreeWyld. Basically, FreeWyld is a vacation rental brand that specializes in immersive experiences. Their properties are actually meant to help you unplug and connect with the people that you're with. And so we talk through the importance of that and where this idea came from, all of that. This is not an ad for FreeWyld, though, of course, I think by the end, you're going to want to go to one of their cabins. I know I do. I'm like, yes, please sign me up to go sit in a cabin with my friends for a weekend. But we also really talk through purpose. Eric is one of these people who has found a lot of purpose in his career. I know we touched on that a couple episodes ago with Ashley Pollard, but with Eric today, we really dive into how we can make our work purposeful. And for him, that has everything to do with helping people connect to those around them and get out of our screens. And so I just hope that today's podcast leaves you feeling inspired, motivated, excited, and really refocused on that simplified life that we're always talking about here. An intentional, simple life that isn't boring, that isn't complacent, but that is really purposeful and, like I always say, intentional. Let's actually live life the way we want to live rather than being sucked into all of these different things that really just benefit the pocketbooks of the people who've created them. You know what I mean? So without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Eric Moeller. Eric, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm so excited about this conversation. It's totally different than anything that I've been able to talk to someone about before. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your platform. I'm excited to get into this.
Me too. Okay, so let's kick this off. If you could tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and also more about FreeWyld, like what that's all about.
Yeah, so oh man, where to start? FreeWyld is a hospitality brand. So I've been in the short-term rental, Airbnb, real estate world for 12 years now. I've kind of done a little bit of everything, but FreeWyld is a hospitality brand that I launched back in November of last year. And now the sole focus is to help people disconnect from technology. We focus on building these absolutely beautifully designed cabins, all in nature. Our locations are 2 to 3 hour drives from metro areas. And the whole idea is to bring people away from the cities and the chaos and all that stuff, and give them an option to or an experience to disconnect from technology. We're not an off-grid property. I've never really enjoyed being off-grid. After a couple of days, it gets boring. This is all about creating spaces and experiences to help people lock their phones away and be present at our properties. So I'm more than happy to get into like the origin story and how we got there. I built this for myself. And I realized the whole world is experiencing the same thing I'm experiencing. And
yes, origin story, please. That was my next question.
Yeah. So it came, we were just talking, I live in San Diego. I've been here for about 8 years. And, during COVID, of course, all around the world, we were all going through it together, and areas just completely changed. And very quickly, our area where we were living, a lot of our friends just left California and went to different places. And this was at like the height of COVID and the height of elections and like all the civil unrest and chaos. And it was like, we were so kind of like where we're at now, just like addicted to our phones of like, hey, what's happening? Like, we're living in a movie right now. My fiance and I, we bought a truck and we just hit the road, and we're staying at different Airbnbs all around the country, trying to figure out where to kind of plant our flag. And we were thinking of moving out of California, the whole thing. And long story short, as we were on this trip, I invited a bunch of friends to join us in this beautiful cabin that we were staying in Utah and in Park City. And it was amazing. We were sitting around this fire and looking at the mountains. And I look around, and every single person, they just landed. They were just there for about an hour. We just sat down around the fire, and every single person is in their phone.
No.
They're just looking at their phone. And I'm just like, I just want to disconnect. I wish I just had a switch that we could just shut off all the phones and we'll just be present. So I grabbed everyone's cell phone. I threw it in a box. I took the box, brought it inside. I locked it in the closet, and I came out and I just said, we're going into Wyld Mode. I'm like, no more technology. Let's just be focused. And it took like a little bit for everyone to be comfortable with it. But a little bit after that, like it was one of the most memorable nights I had on that 6-month trip that we went on, because we were not distracted by all the moving parts all the time. We were able to connect and tell stories and just enjoy each other's company. And I recognize that we all, like, as incredible as technology is, like we're leveraging technology right now to have an awesome conversation and bring it out to many, many listeners. We haven't been taught how to rewire our relationship with devices. So long story short, I came back, and this was at a pivotal moment where my other business was doing well, but I was very unhappy, unhealthy with the whole thing. And I wanted to create something new that was closer to my heart, that has a bigger impact in the world. And through a lot of brainstorming and whiteboarding and all the things, we came up with the FreeWyld concept of creating beautiful spaces in beautiful locations, with the concept of what's called Wyld Mode, where when you check into our property, you have the option to either go into Wyld Mode or Free Mode. And Free Mode is like a regular Airbnb. You have Wi-Fi, you're on your phone, you're doing your thing, watching Netflix. But when you want to disconnect from it all, we literally built a switch where you switch into Wyld Mode. It shuts off the Wi-Fi and it unlocks a part of the house that you only have access to while you're in Wyld Mode.
I want to like back up though for a second, because there's so much there that I'm obsessed with. And and because Wyld Mode is, I was so excited when I was reading about it on your website. I was like, I want to do this so bad. Mm-hmm. But before we get there, first of all, the 6-month road trip is right up my alley. So my family has an adventure van in the back. It's a little 144 Mercedes Sprinter van. And I have 3 kids and 2 dogs and a husband. And we have 2 like bunk beds in the back that are kind of like queen size, and then just like a bench that all 3 of their car seats go on. And we just go on these adventures. And I think that road trip that we first took, actually not in the van, before we even got the van, we drove from Alaska to Florida when we moved here. Oh, wow. My husband's in the Coast Guard. So we, got orders, and we took a month-long road trip. And it was during that time especially that I was so passionate about looking up and getting outdoors. And even in our own country, like there's so much to see. I mean, we went sledding at White Sands National Park. We went to the Redwood Forest. We went and saw the Meteor Crater landmark. We stopped at 19 different places, and all of them were just spectacular, right? Mm-hmm. And I agree. Like, I feel like so much of the time we're just kind of in these like void bubbles on our phone. And this isn't a new conversation. We all know that it's true. But I think the tricky part is finding opportunities and motivation to pull ourselves out of it, right? Like that's the hard part that all of us are struggling with. And I love your intentionality in figuring that out. So I'm actually really curious about your personal mission with this and how you made that transition from strictly being involved with real estate to then saying, I want to do something more purposeful, still using my skills. So you were in short-term real estate. Was that your bread and butter?
Yeah. So think of Airbnb. We had a pretty decent sized Airbnb business all throughout Southern California. And I did that for 6-ish years, which then turned into an educational company where we were helping Airbnb hosts scale hospitality brands. And we did that all around the world at a very high level. And so I've been in the short-term rental space for a very long time. And through being in short-term rentals and scaling these companies and being involved with other companies and helping them grow, I fell in love with hospitality. And I fell in love with like serving other people and creating spaces that can help people create memories and all of that, everything that comes along with running a hospitality business. And then I recognize, to answer your question of like why I made that transition or how I even found that, like, this has been a journey over the last 3.5 years or so of discovering like, oh, my mission here is to help people disconnect from technology. Because when I do that, when I'm intentional with how I use technology, and when I don't use technology, my life is like, it just like the world is a little bit brighter. Things are just get turned up a little bit more. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's amazing. And I
It's
just want to bring
amazing.
that to more people.
Yes. Well, I love
Yeah.
that. I mean, I will always remember one of my favorite memories of all time. I was 20, I don't know, I was 21 years old, and I worked at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, which is a theme park in Virginia.
Yeah,
I
my
was a
sister
singer.
worked there as well.
No
Yeah, back in the day.
way.
Yeah, yeah. She
What
was
a
the
small
dancer there.
world. She was a
Yeah.
dancer? What year?
Uh-huh.
I have to know. Do
Oh,
you
I don't
know?
know. I was probably early 2000s.
Oh, I bet we have so many mutual friends because
Oh,
I was a
wow.
singer. And so the entertainment department is like very tight knit. I was there in 2009.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of my friends that worked there had worked there for years. So they might know
Oh,
your
that's
sister.
amazing.
We'll have to, as soon as
Yeah.
we stop recording, I'm going to get all the deets. That is
Yeah.
such a small little world.
Yeah.
And it makes
Yeah.
sense that she was in New York because I was up there pursuing singing. I'm guessing she's dancing. So
Yep.
anyway, sorry, people. We talked about this off air, but that's a fun little tidbit right there. So anyways, I was working at Busch Gardens and, just in the height of just being a ridiculous 21-year-old. And one of the older, well, I say older, he was probably 29. One of the older entertainers that I was working with invited a small group of us just to go camping for the weekend somewhere in Williamsburg. And it was probably one of the best nights of my life with friends. We just sat around the campfire. Like you said, we were telling jokes. We were talking. This is pre-Instagram. It's 2009. I didn't have a smartphone or anything like that. And so I think we were a little bit less involved with our devices. And so, yeah, I just think about that often when I think about those nights that you feel the most connected to the people around you, most connected to the world as a whole. And as you were talking, I was thinking about Joshua Becker's definition of purpose, which he says it's the intersection of your passions, your abilities, and then meeting a need of others. And I talk about that definition so often on my podcast because I just think it's brilliant. We're all out here like looking for purpose, but it can feel so vague. And I feel like that really ties it together really well. And that's what you're doing. Your passion is like wanting people to connect to each other and to the outdoors. It sounds like you obviously love adventure, but then your abilities are, okay, I have a background in short-term rentals in real estate, and you want to meet this need of others of helping other people to connect with each other. That's part of your passion. And so you're like, how do I put this all together? Cabins, short-term rentals where people are off their phones. I just think what a perfect example of finding a true purpose. It's so exciting. So with that in mind, how has FreeWyld changed your perspective on what it means to work since you're working now with a purpose?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's a lot to this, but I feel this is a business. I've started multiple businesses. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 18 and trying to figure it out for most of the years. And a couple of them worked and most of them didn't. But I always approached business just to make money. And which is, it's fine. It's like, that's what business is. It's about making money and all of that. And I'm never really focused on like the greater good of the business and how it affects me personally, until I found FreeWyld. And what I recognize through this is like, I don't care the size. I have very large vision and grand plans for this brand, but I got really clear that I don't care the size of how big this gets. This is something that I can see myself doing for the rest of my life. Like and I've never had that before. It was always about like, how do I build businesses and make money? And then like, oh, here's another good opportunity, and just be that startup entrepreneur, scrappy entrepreneur looking at different opportunities. But this is something that there's a bit more patience with this because I know this is, and I've had this in my mind since I started this. This is a generational company for me, right? This is something that, I envision my grandkids being able to experience at some point, right? Regardless if they're involved in the business or not, they know what we've created now. So I'm a lot more patient with creating this, and it's something that I realize that it's like, yeah, we're a cabin hospitality company, we're a boutique hotel company, but the thing that I'm so passionate about that is now attracting in all the people around me, from my team members to my investors to our clients, is like this common agreement that like, hey, we love our devices, but we need to be in control of these devices, and like how are we rewiring this within ourselves? And it's just attracting in so many amazing people and conversations and opportunities. So yeah, that's a long response to say I'm just a lot more patient with how I'm working in this. I don't need hockey stick growth right away. And it's amazing, like the guests that we have staying at our cabins, they're first time being introduced to Wyld Mode and the FreeWyld concept. And we get messages all the time of like, hey, we've brought Wyld Mode home and we're doing it now on the weekends with our family. And it's the first time that in a long time that we had dinner with no one on their devices. Right. And so people are adopting this outside of just our cabins. I'm like, all right, this is freaking cool. Let's just keep building this. Let's
That
keep rolling.
motivation
So,
is there. That
yeah.
excitement is there. I actually just wrote a blog post about how ambition and complacency and contentment, like how do they all fit together? I had a recent guest on the podcast and we talked a lot about the difference between contentment and complacency. But then there's this piece of ambition too. And it sounds like you at one point were super ambitious, but now you're able to have a sense of contentment within that ambition. I think contentment, people think they confuse it with complacency and they think I'm not striving towards anything. And like you said, you have these big dreams. I have big dreams for paring down, right? Like it's exciting. That's part of being alive. That's part of intentional living, is thinking about the future and being passionate about what you're doing. And that involves ambition. But the contentment piece is, like you said, is you don't need to reach that hockey stick growth to be happy and to be proud of what you're doing and to know that you are being fulfilled in your work and in your mission, right? And that's the difference. Blind ambition says, I won't be happy until when, right? Until you're the richest man in the world. Like, what is that? What is that fulfillment? It's not, doesn't exist. There's no end in sight. Not that there should be an end in sight, but you know what I mean? It's a hamster wheel. And so it sounds to me like you've really found that piece of contentment, being able to slow down, be more intentional, like you said, within the ambition. So what would you advise someone who maybe currently doesn't feel fulfilled in their industry, in their job, what their skill is? They're like, I haven't found the purpose within that. What would you advise to them?
Yeah, I was actually just talking to someone who's a family member who's kind of been in a career that he's just not happy with, and he has been happy with day one, but it's developed his and supports his lifestyle. And I think a lot of people think that you have to go all in right away to make things work, or you have to have the thing. And this is why, I appreciate these types of conversations, because I think the message that's out in the world of like, you must have this passion that's going to change the world. And if you can't change the world, what are you doing? And it's like, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do this stuff. And I think at the end of the day, personal growth is the most important thing. Like that's to me what life is about. It's like constantly growing, constantly improving, and not with the pressure of I have to grow. It's the curiosity of the areas in your life or your career or your relationships, whatever it is. What are the learning lessons here? How do I grow? How do I get better at being a better communicator? How do I get better at being a leader? How do I get better at, I'm getting married in 70 days from now, and I've never been a husband before. Thank you. So I'm like constantly asking myself, and I'm seeking out the knowledge of people that I really respect, of like, hey, what does it take to run a successful marriage? Like, what is that? Like, what is my role in this? And it's a constant growth. And I think through that eventually leads to passion, right? And I think it eventually leads to interest and discovery and all that stuff. I think Instagram and TikTok and all this stuff has like confused the world to think, especially our country, of like, we have so much opportunity in front of us. We can literally do anything we want at any time. And it's like, I think that's a blessing and a curse, because we have it in our mind that we need to know the thing right away and we have to impact the world. At least that's what I hear a lot of. And for me, I'm just like, every day, where can I learn? What are the things I'm interested in? What can I discover? And eventually, I think that leads to passion. If you would have talked to me a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago about talking to people about disconnecting from technology, like, no, like that was not ever in my radar. That was never a passion of mine until we all collectively went through this thing called COVID, and it affected everyone. Like, we were all in it together. And I recognized, like, oh, we're all addicted to this chaos and we need a break from it. And now it's a passion of mine to help people do that, because it also helps me do it on a daily. It's a practice every day that I have to implement.
Right.
So hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, I don't know how to give advice on how to find passion. It's more of like, just be passionate about everything that you're doing, and eventually it'll lead to your interests.
I think that is really, really great advice, actually, because like you said, there's this pressure to figure out what is my purpose. And then we can feel like we're just like floundering if we haven't figured that out. But if you're just being intentional and growing, it's amazing what new purposes arise. I mean, I certainly had no idea I'd be this passionate about decluttering when I was, living, gosh, I think back to my college dorm. No one could have predicted this.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a mess. And it's interesting how life develops, but I think it developed alongside of my decision after becoming a parent to do more personal growth. And really, once we start digging deep, it's amazing what our eyes open to, and we start saying, oh, wait, I care a lot about this X, Y, and Z thing. And then we become so passionate about it, we want to share it with other people. It happens automatically when, like you said, when you start becoming passionate about growth in general. So I think that was phenomenal advice. And now I'm excited. I want to dive full into Wyld Mode, because this is really cool. So you've kind of given us a high level of Wyld Mode as it kind of accompanies the FreeWyld cabins. But can you tell us a little bit more exactly what you mean by Wyld Mode, other than you just put your phones away?
Yeah, it's being intentional with your time at the end of the day, right? It's my whole concept behind developing FreeWyld and creating Wyld Mode in these cabins were to actually create that physical switch going from being in this device. And I recognize, like, it can't just be putting your phone in a box. We have to physically go through an experience to enter into what I call Wyld Mode, but it's really just intentional time, right? So, at the cabins, we built this technology, which is funny because, like, we're investing in technology to help people disconnect from technology, but we built this technology to actually lock your phone away when you choose. We're not forcing you into it. It's all about personal choice of, like, we need a moment here. Let's just disconnect. If it's 10 minutes or 10 hours, doesn't matter. We've had people come to the cabins and lock it in there and left it all weekend without their phones, right? And it was amazing for them. Other people just disconnect for dinner and it's fine. But they lock their phones away and it unlocks an experience for them in the properties, right? And we have different experiences throughout the cabins. But once we started hearing that our guests were bringing Wyld Mode home with them, we started developing what we now call FreeWyld Fridays. And FreeWyld Fridays, it's something I practice here at home. My friends are now doing it. My family's now doing it. Our guests are now doing it. It's being intentional with your time on, we choose Friday because it's the end of the week and it's the funnest day of the week. But we, here at home, we lock our phones away. We put them in a different room. Everyone's on the same page for that. And we create the experience through music, through scents, through, visuals, dimming the lights. Like we have to create, I know this sounds like a lot, but we have to go through an experience and enter into something different so we can physically break that addiction, right? It's phones are, and social media, as we all know, are just as addicting as the most addictive drugs in the world, right? And I read a stat the other day that the average American right now picks up their phone 100 times a day. And that's on average. The younger generations are much more. So we have to break this addiction somehow. And the best way of doing that is creating memorable experiences. Yesterday, my fiance and I, we left our phones here. We grabbed our journals and a couple of books, went down to the beach for sunset. And we were intentional of not touching our phones and not bringing devices. And it just like, it brings different connection into your world, and things just become just a lot more fun, in my opinion.
It does become a lot more fun. My dog obviously agrees with you on that. If you heard her yap there,
Love it.
you talked about, and we're going to get into those different steps of getting into Wyld Mode. I love, they're listed on your website, and I want to walk through some of them because I think that intentionality is so key. Because like you said, a lot of us, we say we want to get off our phones, but then how do we actually do that? It shouldn't be as complicated, but it can be, especially once you put the phone away and then you're like, and now what, right? You kind of feel like the fish in Finding Nemo that are in the bag at the end of the movie and they're just like floating on top of the water. Now what do we do? That's kind of how I envision it. But before we get there, you shared a little bit about, that experience kind of camping with your friends during COVID. But what repercussions did you notice in your own life when it came to being hyper connected all the time?
So again, as I mentioned, I'm entrepreneur, been running businesses for a long time. And I'm just like, especially in the short-term rental hospitality side, you're on 24/7. And my fiance also runs a successful company as well. And we work from home. We both are at home. And I recognize, like, without the intentionality of disconnecting from technology and creating the space, there's never any off time. We're always on. And like, even people that have a career that's more like a 9 to 5 type of structure where you can leave the work at work and not have to take it home, we're immediately into the social world of this is what's happening, the presidential elections and wars over here, and like this is Sarah said this thing, and like whatever it is, it's like we're constantly plugged in, and without being truly disconnected, I was missing deep connection with my fiance. I was missing deep connection with my friends and family. My anxiety levels were through the roof, and for many different reasons, but especially because I was always in it, right? And I notice it. I can feel it now when my anxiety levels are starting rising. I realize, and I look at my screen time, I realize that my screen time is through the freaking roof. And what do I do is like, I'm on a laptop, then I go to a cell phone, and then I go to a TV, and I'm just like constantly staring at this fake reality. Right?
Have you seen that reel? It's actually pretty funny, of the girl that's like, I give myself a little treat away from my medium screen by looking at my small screen. And then at night I get like my big treat by looking at my big screen. Like it's true. We're just like constantly looking at them. And that anxiety piece is so real. So I was in Ohio for vacation recently at my in-laws' house, and I decided, and I have an Instagram account. So, screens are definitely part of my business, right? So I'm engaging with people. I'm creating content. I'm writing captions. I also work on a social media team for another influencer. Is not the right word for her, but she's a mental health expert in the online space. And so I'm just on my phone or my computer a lot for work. And in Ohio, I took the week off from work with her, and I told myself, who cares if you don't post a reel every day? Like, what's the worst that's going to happen, And I read my book, and I just like hung out outside with the kids and my nieces and nephew. And I mean, it was so wonderful, and I was so calm, and I felt so good. And ironically, the next week I doubled in followers from a reel that like, and it just doesn't matter. It's so much of what we do. I mean, it does matter. Our work matters, excuse me. But like, we get so in this bubble that we need to know what's going on in our friends' lives, and we want to follow our influencers, and we want to do our work, and we want to do this and this and this. And we realize if we just get off of our screens, like, it's going to be okay. Like, in fact, it's going to be better than okay, And so I really appreciate that you recognize how much you were on your screen. And so I'm curious, how has that changed your relationship with your fiance, even now that you guys are so intentional, especially on Fridays?
Yeah. It's a constant area of growth for us, right? Where and same thing with Samantha, like she has a very large following on Instagram, and it's a main driver for her business. And so she's, she creates a lot of content and really good content. And from in the studio to, just being at home, all that stuff. And we recognize, like, if we don't have that structure in our life or that even like the random Wyld Mode, instant in our life, like we start butting heads, and we're not really connected. And once someone in the house says Wyld Mode, we just know we're like, at this point, when we hear Wyld Mode, we just put our phone away, and then we know that we're entering into a different experience, and we've cultivated that, and it's just become a lot more fun. Like we're not just sitting on the couch watching TV at night, right? Like that happens too, because it's freaking awesome and that's a lot of fun. We're really into the show right now called Bear, or The Bear.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I worked it almost reminds me too much of when I worked in a restaurant in New York City. Yeah. I was like, I'm like a little PTSD watching this.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the anxiety level is through the roof from that show. Everyone's yelling at each other.
Right.
But it's so much fun to plug in and watch Netflix, right? And it's like, cool. Like we got to do that stuff. But also, like, for our relationship, we recognize, like, if we do that too much, we're not truly connected. And the polarity between us is not really, at the highest level that it can be. So we literally we'll take FreeWyld Fridays. We'll just completely unplug. After 5:30, we both know that, and we enter into an experience, right? And then we'll take whole weeks where we enter into, we train our team and we set it up to a place where we can fully disconnect. And we typically just go into nature. We go for a drive, all this stuff. So it really, without it, our polarity is not, we're not connected at the end of the day. Like everything I'm talking about is just like connection. It's all about connection at the end of the day. And it's like,
which is a human need.
Yes.
We need that connection as humans. I work, like I said, for a content creator in the mental health space, and she's a psychologist and couples therapist. And so interestingly enough, there's a stat I want to, and I'm not going to say it perfectly, and so just Google it if I'm wrong. I apologize, but I think it's something like couples, they talk with kids specifically, tend to talk about anything other than logistics. Like they actually share and connect less than 10 minutes a day on average, and it's such a problem she sees with her clients, and it's something that whether they are all of the clients around the world, like from Instagram, or her actual clients that come into her practice, is just this total disconnection from their partner. And a huge culprit is we just sit and watch TV, or we're on our phones, and the screen has really come between the connection that they felt. Because if you think about it, when you're in a relationship at the beginning, you don't want to be on your phone. You want to be talking to them and learning about them and making out and doing all the stuff, right? Like that's the exciting part, is that human connection. And then slowly we stop that when we have the screens. And my husband and I, we really value our date nights, and we put our phones away. And we, our last one, we ended up in a courtyard drinking a glass of wine, listening to live music. We didn't have our phones out. And it's just, you come back home from that and you feel so much closer in your relationship. 100%. It changes everything. It changes everything with my friendships. Once a year I get together I was in an a cappella group in college, probably not surprising since I'm a singer. And it's all girls. Have you seen Pitch Perfect, the movie?
I haven't, but I'm familiar with it.
It's like a cult following. It's great with Anna Kendrick. Anyway, it's just like that, just 15 very different girls, and we all come together and sing. Or we used to, 15 years ago. And we still get together once a year, and we usually go to a winery or whatever for a long weekend. And there's like dozens of kids between all 15 of us, but we're just there, no kids. And we are just really not on our phones. Like I can look around the room at any given point, and all of us have been really good over the years about just putting our phones down. I think because we just love each other so much. And it is the best weekend of the year. All of us come back to real life feeling so rejuvenated because we've connected with the people that matter to us. And so that's why I want to walk through these 5 steps. Like you said, it is all about connection, and that is so healthy for us. And it's part of living a fulfilled life. Even with decluttering and consumerism, all the things that I talk about, the point is that when you get to the end of your days, like you said, you can look back on life and be like, I'm so glad that I did X, Y, and Z, or I'm happy with my life instead of saying, I wish I had. And I
Yeah.
think that we're going to see our generation when they get to the end, when they write the new articles about what are millennials saying on their deathbeds. I think a lot of it is going to be, I wish I wasn't on my phone so much. I wish I wasn't on a
Mm,
screen so much,
mm.
because it's not like the older generations, the boomers. I mean, maybe
Wow.
that's going to start soon, but I really think that we're going to hear that. And so all
That's
of this,
powerful. I've never thought of that, because you always, and I'm sorry to interrupt, you always hear, like in the business world, you always hear that the people on their deathbed that made all the money always regretted the amount of time that they spent chasing success versus living their life, right?
Mhm.
Spending time with their family, everything else. And that's a great point of like us in the future on our deathbed. Are we going to look back at the amount of time we spent on our phones versus like just being bored is such an incredible thing for the human body and mind of like, that's where a lot of creativity comes from and ideas and exploration, all of that. And we've lost that because we're so addicted to our phones. And that's a powerful one. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And as a parent, I've already seen that like in my own kids, right? Like we've taken a very intentional approach to screen time and their creativity just blossoms, right? When you
Mm,
force them to be bored. I mean, I literally say to them, boredom is good for you. Go
yep.
be bored. You can be mad at me all you want. But then they come up with the most amazing
Yeah.
games and crafts and like it's so fun. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I had let them watch another hour of TV, that wouldn't have happened. And how important that is for their development specifically at their age. It's wild to see as a parent. You can see things so much more clearly, I feel like, in your own kids. And then it makes you challenge yourself. And I also don't want to
Mhm.
look back at my parenthood and say, I wish I hadn't been on my phone as much. And I'm not perfect at it by any means, but I always say to my kids, because there are times that I will be looking at my phone and they say mommy, and they have to say mommy 3 times to get my attention. And so I would say at least once a week, I say to the kids, what's more important, my phone or you? And they're like, us, right? Like I have
Mm,
to verbalize that to them because I
mhm.
never want them to think mommy's phone is more important than they are to me, because like I have it with me. They know it's usually near me, right? And so I definitely in the last year or two have made a conscious effort not to always have my phone near me, but also to make sure my kids like hear me say, you are more important than my phone.
Wow.
Always interrupt me if I'm on my phone, not when I'm actually talking on
Yeah.
my phone. Like, please stop interrupting my phone conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Drive me crazy,
Yeah.
but if I'm in a hole, like just interrupt me. So anywho, yes, it's a lot to think about. And let's walk through these 5 steps to get into Wyld Mode. So the first one is prepare your space. What do you mean by that?
So one of the first things that we do is, and we do this in the cabins and we also do this at home, is prepare the space. Is like everyone needs to agree to go into the space, and we're cultivating the experience that we want to have, right? So like just take a easy, like what we're doing for FreeWyld Friday this week is we're having some friends over and we're cooking some steaks and just hanging out in San Diego weather and just chilling, listening to some music, right? So we're creating the space as far as like setting the lights. We focus a lot on the five senses, right? To bring us back to like reality, bring us back to being human and just get away from the one, the visual sense of it all. And we bring everything in. So the lighting is very important. The music is very important. The visuals around the house is very important. We turn our TV, we only have one TV in the house and it's in our living room. And during Wyld Mode, we put it onto a nature screensaver on
Yeah.
YouTube. And they're like 12-hour long videos of just flying through nature. And we mute it and we put our favorite, typically records on because it's a bit more analog. Like you gotta be present to turn the music over and instead of just putting Spotify on. So like that's what we mean is like cultivating the space, like entering in, we call it setting the vibes, right? Of like entering into that, because again, the whole idea is you have to reward your right now. Like when we look at our phones, we're we're rewarding our system with this little drug being dropped into our brain constantly, and like that's why we keep going to our phone, right? It's the same thing of using drugs or eating food. It's like our body and brain are seeking it. We have to break that pattern and create a new pattern. And we just recognize like without setting our space, it's not as powerful. We're fighting that urge. But if we can create a space and move through that into something new, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Light a candle, dim the lights and put on your favorite song. Like just that alone will transform your space, and you can physically feel yourself entering into a new space.
Yeah. Have you heard of Hygge?
No.
Oh my
How do
gosh,
you
you
spell
have to
that?
read it. You're going to love it. Hyggge. It's a Danish term. And Danes are, they've been proven over and over again to be among the happiest people in the world, the happiest country. It's usually Nordic countries are. And often it's linked to this kind of minimalist lifestyle. But Hygge specifically is exactly what you're saying. It's about creating, it's a small group of people, usually not like a large group, having a completely disconnected, intimate moment. But they have usually food is involved, but like comfort, smells, and low lights, and a lot of candles are usually involved. And anyways, there's a book called The Little Book of Hygge, which is a really easy read and kind of breaks it down. I think you'll love it, but totally goes hand in hand. It's such a timeless truth that you're speaking of there, and that has been backed up by researchers at the Institute of Happiness. So that's pretty fun
Oh
too.
wow, it's so funny. Like I'm by the way, I'm taking notes on. I'm a big note guy.
Love that.
It's so funny. There's no original ideas out there. Like that's another thing I'm discovering through this.
Yeah.
Like I thought like I was like this mad genius. I came up with this idea to help people disconnect from technology through the short-term rental space. And the further I go into it, like there's companies all around the world with the same idea, trying to solve the same problem. And I'm like, oh, that's freaking awesome. And it's like, setting the stage in Wyld Mode was just something that felt natural to us of what we're creating. And then you dive into it and it's like, oh yeah, humans have been doing this forever.
Oh my gosh.
And it's
Yeah,
like,
I
oh,
had
okay, that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. But the good ideas, they come up over and over again. So usually if it's been done, especially by great people, you're onto something. I just had another guest on the podcast who her whole, I guess, kind of take on minimalism is that she pulls on the work from Charles Wagner, who wrote a book about minimalism in 1895. And we think, oh, life was so much more simple back then, right? And it's
Oh,
not.
I
It
heard that.
wasn't.
Yeah.
In his book, he's talking about how people think of the good old days as when their grandfathers were alive, right? Like this idea of living more simply and being more present and all of this is just, it's not new, but it's still so important. And it's important to have new voices and new ideas that even though they're not the only new idea of that has been done in the same vein, it doesn't mean that the work you're doing isn't important, because I have never talked to anyone else who's been in the space, right? Like you're reaching people that these other companies haven't. And it's great that there's so many of us in this kind of space of helping people disconnect in different ways. So prepare your space is number one. Number two is schedule uninterrupted Wyld Mode time. So scheduling this out. Tell me about that.
Well, you have to. It's like everyone expects you to be available for them the moment they reach out, right? And it's like, if you're not responding to a text message right away, like what's the problem? If you're not picking up the phone, it's like there's an issue. Or if you're not responding to your Instagram messages and likes and all this other stuff, like we've been trained and conditioned to be on call 24/7 all the time. And I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's a healthy way to live. It all comes down to being intentional again at the end of the day, right? So it's like we know that if we're not, just like, you mentioned date night with your husband, it's like we know that if we don't schedule this out, that life is going to get in the way. We know that if we say that FreeWyld Friday in the Moeller household here starts at 5:30, that means that we are winding down our day at 5 and we are heading to the Wyld box to put our phone in the Wyld box at 5:30 because we're starting this experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also we're communicating that to our teams. We're communicating that to the people around us, right? Once you're intentional and you set the goal and you're saying like, hey, we're going to be here at 5:30, we're going to do this thing, it becomes a bit more fun and you're creating a memorable experience.
Right. And
that.
it actually happens. And like you said, the
Yeah.
people around you come to understand that that's part of the way you do life. And so they can respect it a little bit more easily, or they're not concerned if you don't answer a text message the second that they send it,
Yep.
So that's great. So prepare your space with all the different senses, schedule it out, schedule uninterrupted Wyld Mode time. Number 3, begin with a ritual. Tell me more about your rituals.
Yeah. We, I kind of touched on it already. Like for me, the ritual that helps me enter into Wyld Mode is setting the vibes, right? So between my fiance and I, like I set the vibes, she prepares like the food and the drinks and, entertains the friends as they show up. And I'm the one who's like creating the vibe. And that's my ritual, is like entering into that set, creating the vibe, choosing the right, I'm big into music. So we have a ton of albums, and I recognize like that brings me from the digital world to the analog world. And that's my ritual. And we then start going into, depending on the vibe, journaling, or we're cooking a specific type of meal, right? So it's all about just like, oh, we're here again. We've made it to the destination, right?
You've
Like the road
trained
trip.
yourself
Exactly.
to know
Exactly.
that the moment has arrived. The first thing I thought of was when you were talking, I was like, oh, that's like when I go on date night with my husband. I feel like the second we clink our wine glasses, that's our ritual. Like date night has begun.
That's it. That's
Like
it. Yeah.
I've checked in with the babysitter. Everyone's still alive. I'm going to put my phone in my backpack. I'm not going to check it till the end of dinner. And we clink, and so we
Boom.
begin, right?
Fun. Yeah. And it's like, for us and for FreeWyld with our cabins in nature, like our properties are about 2 to 3 hours from the cities. Right. And we recognize like even people that drive out there, like part of the experience and the adventure is the road trip up the mountains and getting to the cabins, but they don't feel like they've actually, like, there's a different feeling of being on the road and like driving out there to arriving to your cabin for the first time and dropping your bags and like, we're here, we've set that destination. So like as we're talking about this, it's like this is really important for people taking Wyld Mode home with them, and how they can implement this frequently in their lives. But to us, it's like let's create something that we know that we're there, right?
Yeah.
Cheersing each other with our wine glasses. We made it to date night and we're here. Let's have fun. It's just about us, right? And that's incredible. It's like it unlocks something in the soul for people.
Yeah, it's akin to dropping the bags in the cabin. Like we've made it here. I love that. So prepare your space, schedule it out, begin with a ritual. Number 4 is curate your activities. You've kind of touched on this, but do you want to elaborate a little more?
Yeah. So, we get bored after doing the same stuff all the time. Right. And we recognize like, again, we're trying to feed this part of our brain that is like seeking this reward system that's attached to our cell phones. Right. And it's like, we have to constantly be switching it up. So we plan it out now. So like, even for our guests that check into our cabins, we'll help them craft different experiences for them. Right. So on our property, we have a couple of acres of guest amenities and stuff. And, there's a breathwork and meditation deck that's by the creek. There's a Wyld Mode gazebo around a fireplace. There's a game area, like all these different things. So we'll help them kind of craft an agenda for when they're at our properties of like, hey, when we go into Wyld Mode, whenever you decide to do that, the first thing you do is you go to the gazebo and have a s'mores, right? The second thing you do is have, play this game. And then third thing you do. So like we help them craft that, and it becomes that memorable experience again, where they don't need to be on their phones. Because if we're just saying like, hey, we're going to lock our phones away and we're just going to sit on the couch and listen to some music, like that's freaking cool. But after a while, it might get boring, and you want to kind of think through that process. So that's what we mean by that point.
Love it. I love that so much. Okay. And then the very last step is when it's over, ease back in. What does that look like?
We recognize that like there's times where we're itching to get back into like Instagram and Twitter and Slack and emails and all this stuff. And we just spent all this time going through this space and rewiring our brains to say like, hey, we actually don't need this drug anymore. And then right away, the first thing that we do is we fill our system with all the notifications, all the emails, all the drama, all the fun videos, like all the things. So your brain is going through this like overload again, and we're back to being addicted to this thing. And it's like hot and cold at the same time. So what we like to do and what we encourage our guests to do is just ease back in. You can touch your phones, do your thing, but do your best to stay off of Instagram and Slack and work things, and stay more focused on the people that you're traveling with. Or if you're doing this at home, the people that you're currently with. Because if we just dive back in and watch TV, dive back into like Instagram or whatever it is, we're not creating that pattern of Wyld Mode or disconnection or reconnection, where we're just filling ourselves with the same drug.
Yeah, that makes sense. In my head, I'm like, okay, say I'm only going to get on for 10 minutes. What do I want to check my email? Do I want to do something on Instagram? Do I, whatever, but like maybe even a time limit. I feel like would be easier to implement a time limit in some senses after doing a full like Wyld Mode detox,
Yeah.
and using that Wyld Mode as kind of a catalyst, like you said, to excuse you, dogs. Sorry. My dogs are losing their minds tonight. Don't worry. My listeners know I have dogs,
Yeah. Yeah.
clearly.
They're
But
excited
anyways,
about wild mode.
yeah. So yeah, exactly. Speaking of Wyld Mode, so no, I think that makes a lot of sense. You're not supposed to just I went to a cabin for a weekend and it not actually affect the way that you move forward in your life. Like you said, this is all about intentional living and changing your life as a whole. We can't all just go live in a cabin the rest of our lives, nor do we want to. We have these big
Right.
dreams and
Yeah.
aspirations, and we want to do that. But it's that reset time, and a reset means that we should be then entering back in with a new perspective. And so
Exactly.
I think that's fantastic. All right, listen, this is all amazing. I want to go to your cabins. I do need to know, they're all in California, or where can people go to
Yeah.
experience this?
Yeah, as of right now, we're just in southern SoCal. So we're in a town called Idlewild, California, which is about 2 hours northeast of San Diego, 2 hours southeast of LA, right outside of Palm Springs or Palm Desert there. But we're working very, very hard on opening up our next locations. We're hopefully, cross our fingers, opening up in Sedona. We're working on a project there. We're working on another property in the same town of Idlewild and a couple other markets. So the real estate world moves really slow.
Right.
And part of that patience process is part of this. So yeah, FreeWyld, anybody can check it out on freewyld.com, and love to create those experiences for you and anyone who's listening.
Man, what a worthy like vacation. I can just already like girls trips. Like let's
Mm-hmm.
go to a Freewild. You don't have to live in California to go there. We're all planning what's the best vacation. The best vacation is one that you connect with the people that you love, and
Yeah.
so that's a really exciting prospect. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you the two questions that I ask everyone at the end of my podcast. And the first is, what is something that you're currently paring down?
Mm. Uh, I mean, outside of phones, I'm currently I'm paring down travel
Oh, tell me
from the
more. What do you
travel guy.
mean?
From the travel guy. Um, we have had a blessed life of traveling the world and going to events and seeing every part of this world. And with both of our businesses, my fiance and I, like, we have endless opportunities to travel. And we just got back from a 6-week trip where we spent a week, or a 3-week trip. We spent a week in Austin, flew to Austin and spent a week in Estonia of all places. And then flew from there and went to Alabama. And then we're going to Canada next week. And like, we have all this opportunity to travel the world, which is amazing. But what I've recognized most recently is that as beautiful as travel and access to the world is, it's somewhat of a distraction to my bigger goals and vision in life of what I'm truly passionate about working on and expanding this business and my health journey and a few other things that I'm really passionate about working on. So I'm switching the same intentionality that I have with my phone time is I'm doing the same for travel. So we are creating sprints in our life of, we're home, we're doing our things, and we're earning the travel. And we're not just going to say yes to every opportunity that comes along to us.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I can't stop talking about this book, Things That Matter. It's by Joshua Becker. I brought it up obviously multiple times tonight already. You've got to read it. I mean, no pressure, but I think you
I'm
would love
writing it
it.
down.
Yeah, because in it he talks about how leisure is a fantastic booster to your purpose. It gives you the energy and the rejuvenation to do that, but it is a terrible end goal. And travel
Exactly.
can easily become the end goal. I want to make money and I want to live a financially free life and all of this. And I want to disconnect so that I can experience the world. But leisure is not a great end goal, because truly what fulfills us isn't leisure, it's purpose. And so I think that's what you're
Mm-hmm.
getting at too, is you want to spend more time in your purpose and not
Yeah.
in leisure.
Yeah.
So that's
And
amazing.
we're earning the trips that we're taking, just like I'm earning my screen time and everything else in my life right now. It's like I have to be intentional versus just saying yes to every travel opportunity that comes to me. So we're also choosing trips that are more restorative than just any opportunity. So spending more time in nature, and then instead of going every other week, we're going to be earning it each quarter.
Good for you guys. Love that. Okay. And the last question is, what's something that you are currently looking forward to? It can be small, it can be big, anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting married in October.
Hey!
Yeah, I've never done that before, so that's gonna be fun. And yeah, I'm super excited about that. Yeah, I've always heard everyone talk about their, marriage and wedding and all of that, and it was never real to me. And we're in it now. Like, we're planning this thing. We're doing it in Idlewild at our property,
Cool.
which is amazing. And we have friends and family flying in from all around the world, and we're spending 3 days in the mountain. The wedding's designed as a adult summer camp. So we have games, we're camping out, we have cabins, we have Wyld Mode all throughout the property where people are going to lock their phones away, and we're just going to be fully connected for 3 days playing games, and we're going to end it with a big party. It's going to be amazing.
Okay. That's the dream. I'm like low-key sad we didn't meet before this so I could weasel my way into being your friend so I could be invited to your wedding, because that sounds really fun. I love that.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh. Well, congratulations. I'm really happy for you. And you said what your website was, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes, but would you let everyone know where they can find you online and learn more about FreeWyld?
Yeah, so FreeWyld is on our main platform that we're focused on right now is Instagram. So it's Stay FreeWyld, FreeWyld. And then, of course, freewyld.com. And then I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. I barely post on Instagram for the last year or so. But yeah, you can follow my journey. I post up every once in a while there. It's Eric D. Moeller.
Sweet. I'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Eric, for being here. This is a really fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.